fun today. Now, of course, you all recognize that run. That's just purely gratuitous. We're not going to be talking about that today. What we are going to talk about is the topic that drives guitarists and music folks wild, and that's music theory. Now, before you run away, we're going to have fun with music theory. Basically with the idea of poking a little bit fun at the way we think of things, but try to use this as a way of thinking about the guitar and music in a little different way. So let's just try it out. A great question to ask yourself is just, how many scales are there? Now, this question drives pure music folks absolutely wild. Guitarists go, you don't need music theory anyway, so it doesn't matter, and everybody's good. I, on the other hand, I'm going to say there are like 4. And you might say, well, how on earth are you going to justify a number like 4? You're crazy. Always possible. That may not be the question I'm answering today. But why is there 4? And this is where it's kind of interesting. We throw words around like they don't have any meaning. For instance, where did the idea of a scale come from? Well, as we go back and forth in language and the etymology of things, you basically figure out that the idea of a scale is like a ladder. And once you kind of get the idea, wait, we have ladders. I understand ladders. They're not that hard to understand. Right. So all we're really looking for in our music theory idea is, what's the various ladder that we would put up to ascend an octave? Now, whether you're ascending or descending isn't the real issue here, but we'll just work with that idea. How many ladders do I need to describe what's going on? And so this is kind of fun. Of course, we have our little half note scale. Okay, in C, we just have the notes that go from C to the octave C, and that's going to give us our basic first set of 12 notes, and they're that half step apart, and etc. So there's one of our ladders. We have a half step scale. Now, that half step, if you like, we understand it's a ratioed step. It's not a linear step, but that's okay. That's a little bit of fanciness. But we get it. That makes sense. What else can we do? Well, we can do a whole note step. Okay, and we've got our whole note scale. And it's going from C to C. Now, you might say, those are crappy scales. They're crappy scales, it's fine. But it's important because these are the different ladders. The next one we remember, our major scale. Wow. Now we're starting to see a different ladder. It sounds different, but we get it. There's a set of steps. The next one I like is the pentatonic scale. And of course, that's where our next octave sits. So 6 notes, but 5 note in between. And we've got our pentatonic scale. Now, wherever he gets excited is they'll go, but wait, what about, and we put in a boatload of other scales. Now, there are some other ones that we might have to be kind of careful of and at some point treat: harmonic minor, melodic minor, etc. Those ones might deserve some special treatment. But for right now, and especially with Western music, we can break everything down to those 4 ladders. And the one we're going to talk about is the major scale. It's the most interesting. The other ones are all the rules apply to, but we'll just talk about it from the major scale. Now, why do I think there's only one ladder? Well, the intervals that we're going to follow are just the intervals we're going to follow. Whether I start with a C note, or start with a G note, or start with an A note, when I do the major scale, it's the same ladder. And it's that whole, half, whole, half type ladder. And we go, well, okay, that kind of makes sense. I might even buy into that. But what about that minor scale? We all know there's minor scales. Well, now we're into the religion of music theory. The ladder doesn't change. The rung we start on changes. And maybe you have to have ladders that are 2 octaves long to make this make sense. But when we go through all the various modes, and including the Aeolian mode, which is the minor scale, all we did was start on a different rung of the ladder, and everything else stayed the same. The intervals were determined by the major scale. We're just doing modes. That's an interesting idea because we lose our minds when it comes to modes. We freak out thinking there's something special. Nope, we're just starting on a different rung of the ladder. The great thing is the kind of the psychoacoustic part of this is we get different feels because of the different intervals and how we're playing them. And that's really cool. But if you just think about what I've said here and don't just flip out, what you'll figure out is we've reduced music down to learning 4 ladders. Just 4, and we apply them whatever note we start with. Now maybe you can't do this with every instrument. I don't know how this applies to the bagpipes or something like that. But with the guitar, everything we're doing is so nicely developed and so nicely laid out, we can get away by talking about just 4 ladders, 4 scales, and having everything kind of work out. I look forward to hearing how people think about this. Hopefully it's a simplification, but I'm sure somebody will have a comment or two on this.